Lando Norris said something after Barcelona that most people filed under routine paddock commentary and moved on. Ferrari is already fastest in the corners. If the engine upgrade delivers in Austria, nobody will be able to match them. That is not a Ferrari engineer talking about their own car. That is the reigning world champion, driving the second fastest car on the grid, describing a scenario where Ferrari becomes untouchable and saying it out loud in a press conference after finishing third. Norris has no reason to overstate Ferrari's threat. McLaren and Ferrari are direct rivals in both championships. Every percentage point of credibility he lends to Ferrari's Austria narrative is a percentage point that increases pressure on his own team. He said it anyway, because the Barcelona data left him no choice. Ferrari's qualifying trace showed Hamilton 0.4 faster than Russell through the corners on a lap where Hamilton was deliberately managing energy rather than attacking. The chassis was already there. The upgrades were already working. The only thing preventing a clean sweep of every session all weekend was the engine, the one weakness Ferrari had been carrying since the season began, and the one weakness that by deliberate design was always meant to be addressed at exactly this point in the season. Austria is that point. And the plan Ferrari just confirmed is bigger than the engine story alone. The power deficit Ferrari has been carrying since the Australian Grand Prix was not an accident. It was a decision. Understanding that decision is the key to understanding why the Austria plan is bigger than a simple engine upgrade announcement. Ferrari's power unit philosophy is built around a steel alloy cylinder head, a component that most manufacturers rejected in favor of aluminium because aluminium is lighter. Ferrari chose steel because steel tolerates combustion chamber pressures and temperatures that aluminium cannot sustain. That tolerance is not free. Running a steel cylinder head creates a heavier, hotter power unit that requires different cooling architecture. Ferrari solved the cooling problem by deliberately designing the SF26 around a smaller, more compact radiator package, which freed up bodywork volume that aerodynamicists converted into downforce. The result is a car that carries less aerodynamic drag for the same downforce level, because the side pods that package the cooling system are more efficient than they could have been with a conventional thermal approach. In concrete terms, the engine that seemed weak on the straights all season was weak in part because it was running hotter than any rival, intake air entering the intercooler at over 100 degrees Celsius compared to the 60 to 70 degree range that conventional designs use. That heat is not a failure of engineering, it is the cost of a specific trade. Less immediate power output in exchange for a smaller cooling package, which produced a cleaner aerodynamic body, which produced more efficient downforce, which made the SF26 the fastest car through the corners on the grid. Norris identified this trade from the outside. Ferrari is fastest in the corners because the cooling compromise that created the power deficit also made the aerodynamic body more efficient. The two things are connected, and the Austria upgrade does not abandon the philosophy, it pushes it further. The Austria upgrade has three distinct components, and the interaction between them is what makes the package more than the sum of its parts. The first is the engine specification itself. Ferrari will introduce the third power unit of the 2026 season at the Red Bull Ring, the first unit carrying modifications permitted under the ADUO framework. The changes target the combustion chamber and turbocharger internals. The compressor vane count and impeller angle on the turbo are being revised within the same overall physical footprint, preserving Ferrari's packaging advantage while improving high RPM airflow delivery. The combustion chamber geometry evolves further toward extracting maximum energy from each fuel cycle rather than simply burning fuel at higher temperatures. The second component is the fuel. Ferrari's partnership with Shell's technical laboratory in Hamburg has produced a revised fuel formulation specifically matched to the new combustion environment. The intercooler intake temperature ceiling rises from over 100 degrees to between 1110 and 115 degrees Celsius. The custom fuel is engineered to perform at those temperatures in ways that standard formulations cannot, extracting more usable energy from each combustion cycle without requiring additional fuel flow. The third component is what neither can deliver independently. A combustion chamber that runs hotter needs a fuel chemistry that handles that heat. A fuel that unlocks more energy at higher temperatures needs a combustion chamber that can sustain those temperatures. The gains from each component multiply when they operate together rather than adding up linearly. This is why it is difficult, even for the people building it, to separate how much of the gain comes from the engine hardware the FIA has approved under ADUO and how much comes from the Shell collaboration. The honest answer is that it comes from both, designed as a single integrated package rather than two separate improvements. Drop a comment. Do you think the Austria engine changes the championship picture? Norris's statement after Barcelona was not a generous compliment delivered to a rival. It was a technical observation from a driver who has spent the entire season watching Ferrari's corner speeds on the same circuits, at the same moments, through the same data channels that every team uses to understand their rivals. Ferrari is already fastest in the corners. If the engine delivers, nobody can match them. The Barcelona qualifying data gives that statement a specific number. Hamilton was 0.4 of a second faster than Russell through Sector 2, the technical heart of the Circuit de Catalunya, where downforce and aerodynamic balance decide everything. He built that advantage while deliberately managing his hybrid energy deployment, backing out of throttle at certain corner entries to bank electrical charge for the final sector. Even with that conservative approach, the Ferrari was pulling away from the fastest qualifier of the 2026 season through every single corner in the middle of the lap. Then the straight arrived. The energy Hamilton had carefully banked through the corners was not enough. The Mercedes engine simply pulled. 0.4 built through 11 corners evaporated in 200 meters. Russell crossed the line first by 64 thousandths of a second. That gap, 64 milliseconds, is the number that defines Ferrari's entire 2026 situation. It is the gap between a car that can already out-corner the championship leaders and a car that loses those corners back on the straight. The Austria engine upgrade does not need to close all of it. It needs to close enough of it that the corners Hamilton wins stop bleeding away before the timing beam. The gap between winning the corners and winning the lap is, according to the Barcelona trace, somewhere around 0.4. The gap the Austria upgrade is targeting is the straight line component of that 0.4. If even half of it closes, if the speed trap at the Red Bull Ring shows Ferrari losing 0.2 rather than 4 on the straight, the qualifying math changes completely. The Austria narrative around Ferrari has focused almost entirely on Hamilton, the first win, the championship gap closing to 41 points, the engine upgrade arriving at the perfect moment. That focus is understandable, but it risks missing the other half of the Ferrari story, which matters just as much to whether the Austria plan delivers in full. Charles Leclerc has a specific and documented history at the Red Bull Ring that is unlike almost any other circuit on the calendar. In 2022, he overtook Max Verstappen 3 times at Spielberg in the same race, a performance that illustrated exactly the kind of aggressive, committed corner entry style that the Red Bull Ring's tight, traction-limited layout rewards. In 2025, Ferrari's race pace at Spielberg was strong enough that Leclerc described it as the circuit where the team had finally unlocked what their car could do. The Red Bull Ring suits Ferrari's aerodynamic strengths more naturally than most circuits, because the short lap and tight corner sequences mean the traction-limited sections where downforce matters most represent a disproportionately large fraction of the total lap. Barcelona proved that the SF26's aerodynamic foundation is working. Leclerc has not yet had a clean weekend to demonstrate what that foundation looks like across both cars simultaneously. His Barcelona qualifying ended in the barriers. His race ended with the hydraulic failure that Ferrari's engineers are still investigating for a possible connection to his Monaco retirement. Austria is the circuit where Leclerc has historically shown the ability to extract maximum performance under pressure. If the engine upgrade lands on both cars as expected, and if Leclerc arrives at a circuit that suits him without the electronic problems that have compromised his last 2 race weekends, Ferrari's Austria plan stops being a one-driver story and becomes something considerably more significant for the championship. Norris called it from the outside, using the Barcelona data that was available to every team on the grid. Ferrari is already winning the corners. The engine is the last remaining piece. Austria is where that piece arrives. The plan Ferrari confirmed covers 3 things simultaneously. A new engine specification that pushes the combustion philosophy further than any rival thought practical. A custom shell fuel built specifically for that higher temperature environment, and a chassis that has already proven in Barcelona's extreme heat that it can out-corner and out-tire manage the championship leaders when conditions test everything the car has. Layer the engine onto that chassis, and the car Norris described as potentially untouchable stops being a prediction and becomes a question of whether the upgrade delivers what the engineers have been promising since before the season began. The championship picture going into Austria is specific. Antonelli leads by 41 points over Hamilton. The Mercedes battery problem has now cost the championship leader points in consecutive races without a confirmed fix. Ferrari is arriving with the most comprehensive package upgrade of the season: engine, fuel, and a circuit where Charles Leclerc has historically performed at his absolute best. Bigger than anyone expected is a subjective phrase, but Norris putting Ferrari in the category of untouchable if the engine lands, that is not subjective. That is the reigning world champion doing the mathematics in public.